When my mom remarried, I didn't expect much to change. She'd always been the kind of person who believed in second chances, and Roger seemed like a decent man. Steady, quiet, the kind of guy who showed love by fixing leaky faucets and paying bills on time. He wasn't trying to replace my dad. And I wasn't looking for anyone to. I was 17, just trying to survive senior year without drawing attention to myself. I liked sketching alone during lunch, listening to old records in my room, and not talking about feelings. My world had a kind of stillness to it, a fragile peace I'd made with loneliness. Then Caleb moved in. Roger's son from a previous marriage. 1 year older than me, with a soft voice and a presence that filled every room he entered, even when he said nothing at all. He was athletic in a quiet way, lean, strong arms, always in worn hoodies and cuffed jeans. He had these sharp eyes, the kind that watched more than they spoke. And when he did speak, it was always deliberate. Nothing wasted. The first time I saw him, he was dragging a suitcase up our front steps. I watched from the kitchen, trying not to make eye contact. He glanced at me, gave a slight nod, and kept walking. No introductions. No awkward small talk. We were two strangers sharing walls. At dinner that night, my mom beamed with this hopeful light in her eyes as she served baked chicken and potatoes, trying to make everything feel normal. Caleb sat across from me, quietly thanking her, chewing methodically. We didn't say much, just passed the salt, made polite noises. But I noticed how his voice lingered in the air a second longer than anyone else's. How he smelled faintly of soap and winter air. We didn't talk for the first week. Not really. Just the occasional hey, or pass me that, when our paths crossed. He kept mostly to himself, headphones in, bedroom door half shut. I thought he might be cold. But then I caught him one night in the garage, gently untangling the Christmas lights my mom had shoved into a box the year before. He wasn't angry or impatient, just quiet, patient, focused. Like he wanted to help without needing praise. I started noticing things. How he always wiped the sink after brushing his teeth. How he checked to see if mom needed help before sitting down to eat. How he never raised his voice, even when he was annoyed. I noticed how he would glance at me sometimes, like he was trying to figure me out too. Then came the day everything shifted. It was a Tuesday. Rain poured down hard all afternoon, and by the time I got home, my hoodie was soaked, shoes squishing with every step. I dropped my backpack by the door, trying to disappear before anyone saw the expression on my face. School had been rough. 2 guys from chemistry class thought it was funny to corner me outside the gym and ask if I swung both ways. I didn't answer. They didn't need me to. Their laughter followed me all the way to the parking lot. I kept my head down, gripping the stair rail, heart pounding. I didn't want to explain. Didn't want to cry. Just wanted the day to end. But Caleb was in the kitchen, eating cereal straight from the box, leaning against the counter like he had no worries in the world. He looked up when I passed and stopped mid-chew. "You good?" he asked. I tried to nod. "Yeah," I croaked, my voice betraying me. He set the cereal down slowly. "You don't look it." "I'm fine," I said too fast, already turning away. Then came the part one didn't expect. Caleb walked over, not fast, not dramatic, just steady. Like he didn't want to scare me. "I'm not gonna ask what happened," he said. "But if you need to not be alone right now." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Because by then, he was pulling me into a hug. It wasn't a quick, casual hug. It wasn't one of those side-armed, half-hearted pats you give someone when you're trying to be polite. It was real, firm, quiet. Both arms wrapped fully around me, his chin resting lightly near my shoulder. I froze for a second, body stiff, unsure. But then something in me gave way. I pressed my hands into his back and exhaled, letting my weight lean into his. He didn't move. Neither did I. It lasted longer than it should have. 5 seconds. 10. Maybe longer. I wasn't counting. I was too busy trying to ignore how fast my heart was beating. How warm his chest felt against mine. How right it felt, and how wrong that scared me. When he finally let go, he didn't say anything. Just gave me a soft pat on the back and stepped away like nothing had happened. I nodded once. Then went upstairs. In the silence of my room, I sat on my bed, still wearing my wet hoodie, staring at the wall like it could explain something I didn't understand. I wasn't sure what I felt. Safe. Embarrassed. Seen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way his arms felt around me. How he hadn't flinched or pulled away. How his breath had been calm while mine was racing. How it hadn't felt like a stepbrother comforting a stepbrother. Not to me. I didn't know what it meant. But I knew this much. I didn't stop him. And I didn't want to. After that hug, something shifted between us, something small, but undeniable. It wasn't that Caleb started acting differently, exactly. He still moved through the house with the same calm rhythm, still wore the same threadbare hoodies, still nodded when we passed in the hallway. But there was a new weight to the air between us, something unspoken that seemed to follow us wherever we went. We didn't talk about what had happened. We didn't need to. It lingered in our silences, in the pauses before speaking, in the way we both looked away a second too late. What surprised me most was how quickly that moment turned into more. Not more hugs, not right away. Just more time. He started showing up when I was around. Not obviously, just small things. If I was watching a movie in the living room, he'd wander in and sit nearby. Not right next to me. Not far either. Just close enough to feel him. Sometimes he'd ask what I was listening to if I had my headphones on. Sometimes we'd end up in the garage together, quietly folding laundry or helping my mom with groceries. We weren't brothers. We weren't really friends either. But we were becoming something else. Something I couldn't name. One Friday evening, Mom and Roger went to a friend's dinner party, leaving us alone. I microwaved leftover pasta and put on a movie, something we'd both seen before so we wouldn't need to focus too hard. Caleb sat on the floor, back against the couch, while I stretched out above him. Midway through, the power flickered and cut out completely. The TV went black. The heater died with a groan. I laughed, startled. Well, that's not ominous. Caleb stood and moved toward the hallway closet. There's candles in here, I think. He lit two and brought them back into the room. The soft, flickering light threw long shadows on the walls, painting everything in gold and amber. I sat cross-legged on the couch, watching him as he set one candle on the coffee table. He looked different. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. He turned, caught me staring, and smirked. What? Nothing, I said too quickly, heart lurching. He sat down again, this time on the couch beside me. We didn't speak for a long time. Just sat there, listening to the storm tapping on the windows, the candle flames swaying with every draft. I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. My arm brushed his once. Accidentally, I told myself. But I didn't move away. Neither did he. Eventually, I leaned my head back, eyes drifting shut. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember waking up. It was still dark. Still quiet. The storm had faded. The candles were out. Caleb was still next to me. Not touching, but close. His head tilted toward me slightly, lips parted in sleep. I stared at him for a long time, breathing carefully, afraid to move and shatter the quiet. Something about that moment felt sacred. The next morning, I woke up in my room, unsure how I got there. Maybe I moved in the middle of the night. Maybe he carried me. I didn't ask. But after that night, we weren't just passing time together. We were choosing it. He invited me into his world more, music, games, stories from his old school. And I let him into mine. I showed him my sketchbook, something I rarely shared. He didn't laugh or make dumb jokes. He just looked, nodding slowly like he understood. We laughed more. We touched more, shoulders bumping, hands grazing. The second hug came after a long day. We'd just finished stacking firewood in the backyard, and I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. Caleb dropped beside me, groaning dramatically. That was manual labor, he said. Pretty sure we deserve medals. I laughed, then sighed. Honestly, that felt good. Being useful. He looked at me for a second too long. Then, wordlessly, he leaned in and wrapped his arms around me. It wasn't playful. It wasn't brief. It was firm. Intentional. His chin pressed lightly to my shoulder. I felt his chest rise and fall against mine, slow and steady. My hands found his back before I even realized what I was doing. I didn't breathe for the first few seconds. And I didn't want it to end. When we pulled apart, he didn't speak. Just gave me a crooked half-smile and stood to go upstairs. I sat alone on the couch, staring at the space he'd left behind, heart thudding in my chest like it was trying to tell me something I already knew. I couldn't keep pretending this was nothing. It was something. And it was getting harder to ignore. It happened on a Saturday. The kind of afternoon that moved slow and soft, like the world itself didn't want to be noticed. My mom and Roger were out of town for the weekend, attending some vineyard wedding 3 hours away. Caleb and I had the house to ourselves, and for once, neither of us made a big deal about it. We stayed in, cooked frozen pizza, played old music, let the hours slide past us like warm water. It wasn't special, not in any way that someone else would have noticed. But to me, it felt like standing on the edge of something I couldn't see, knowing the ground behind me had already disappeared. By early evening, the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long orange light across the living room floor. Caleb was lying on the couch, his arm flung lazily over his eyes. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, legs stretched out, pretending to scroll through my phone even though I hadn't looked at the screen in 10 minutes. "You ever think about just leaving?" he asked suddenly, his voice low, muffled by his sleeve. "Leaving what?" I asked, startled. "This town. This house. This version of you." I looked up slowly, unsure what to say. He moved his arm and met my eyes. There was something raw in his gaze. Unhidden. "All the time," I finally whispered. He nodded once, like that answer meant more than I could understand. The silence after that wasn't empty. It was heavy, like it was holding its breath for us. He sat up and patted the cushion beside him. I hesitated, then stood and walked over, sitting carefully next to him, not quite touching. My pulse throbbed in my neck. We talked for hours, about old dreams, childhood fears, the people we pretended to be. I told him how I hated being afraid of myself. He told me how he'd always felt like he didn't belong anywhere. Somewhere between shared stories and long pauses, the distance between us disappeared. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was both of us. Maybe neither. All I know is that 1 minute we were sitting side by side, our knees almost touching, and the next, I was leaning into his shoulder, and his arm wrapped around me like it belonged there. It started with another hug. But this one felt different. It wasn't comforting. It wasn't casual. It was full of everything we hadn't said. His hand slid up my back, resting just below my neck. My breath caught. I held him tighter. My face pressed into the space where his chest met his collarbone, and I could feel his heartbeat, steady, real. He didn't let go. I didn't want him to. No words passed between us. There was nothing to say. Everything had already been spoken in the spaces between our touches, our glances, our silences. The room around us faded. The candlelight flickered on the shelf. Somewhere in the background, music played softly from my speaker, something instrumental, melancholic, fragile. He pulled back just enough to look at me. His eyes searched mine again, but this time they didn't ask a question. They offered an answer. And I didn't look away. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. It was more than that. It was the closeness, the choice to stay wrapped around each other when no one was watching, when no one was expecting anything. It was how our hands found each other and stayed there, palms pressed like a promise we couldn't say out loud. Eventually, we drifted apart, not from distance, but from tiredness. He lay back against the couch. I lay next to him, shoulder to shoulder, breath sinking, eyes on the ceiling. "I've never felt like this," I said into the quiet. He turned his head slightly. "Me either." The next morning, everything was different. I woke up in my bed, unsure how I got there. The living room was clean. The dishes were put away. The blanket we'd shared was folded neatly on the couch. Caleb was in the backyard, headphones in, tossing a baseball into the air. He didn't mention the night before. At breakfast, he talked about school and gas prices like nothing had happened. I played along. Smiled where I should. Nodded on cue. But I felt something inside me curl inward, like a door had opened and closed all in the same breath. He was quiet the rest of the day. Not cold, but distant. Careful. I wanted to ask him what it meant. I wanted to say, "Tell me it wasn't just me." But I didn't. Instead, I walked past him in the hallway that night, and he didn't look up. And I realized I wasn't standing on the edge anymore. I had already jumped. After that night, everything between us fell into a strange, delicate quiet. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't a fight. It was worse. It was silence that tiptoed around memories we weren't ready to face. Caleb stopped waiting for me in the kitchen. I stopped drawing when he was home. Our paths still crossed, but our eyes rarely did. The space we had carved out, warm, secret, impossible, began to dissolve without a word. He went back to his routines, school, workouts, evening runs with his headphones in. I watched him from the upstairs window sometimes, trying to trace the shape of what we were before the silence swallowed it. At night, I lay awake thinking of that moment on the couch, how long we held each other, how real it felt. It played like a movie I wasn't sure ever existed outside my mind. I kept hoping he'd knock on my door. Say something. Anything. But the days turned into a week, then 2. And Caleb didn't reach for me again. I tried pretending it didn't matter. I laughed more loudly around the dinner table. I filled my time with schoolwork and noise. But everything I did felt hollow, like I was acting in someone else's skin. One evening, I passed him on the staircase. We were just inches apart. He smelled like pine soap and fresh air. My hand brushed the banister. His fingers hovered near mine. He looked at me. And then he looked away. That's when I understood he wasn't going to acknowledge it. Not because he hadn't felt it, but because he didn't know what to do with it. Or maybe he did, and that was the hardest part to accept. The rest of senior year passed in a slow blur. He graduated early. Got into a college upstate. My mom cried. Roger took him out for steak. I watched him pack his bags in silence, my throat thick with words I'd never say. The morning he left, I stood by the front door, arms crossed, trying to act like I wasn't waiting for a goodbye. He came downstairs carrying his duffel, keys jingling in his hand. He paused when he saw me. "Take care of yourself," he said, voice even. I nodded. "You too." He hesitated for a moment. His eyes met mine. For a heartbeat, it looked like he might reach out. But instead, he just gave a small smile and turned away. And that was it. The house felt emptier without him. Not just quiet, emptier, like something vital had been removed and everything else was trying to rearrange around the absence. I stopped checking my phone for a text that would never come. I stopped walking past his room like I expected to hear music from the other side. But I never stopped thinking about that hug. Years passed. I went to college. Made new friends. Learned how to pretend I'd never wanted something I couldn't have. I dated. Broke things off. Tried again. But no matter who I met, there was always a part of me that stayed rooted in that living room, held tightly in arms that were never mine to keep. One day, scrolling through Instagram, I found him. Caleb. Standing beside a man I didn't recognize, smiling in a way I remembered too well. The caption was simple. He said yes. I stared at the post for a long time. Not angry. Not sad. Just still. So he'd felt it too. Not just the hug. Not just that night. All of it. Everything we couldn't say. Everything we chose not to. I didn't message him. I didn't press like. I just sat there, my phone warm in my hand, and let the memory unfold one last time. That hug wasn't a mistake. It was a moment of truth in a life full of pretending. And maybe that's why it stayed with me, because it was the only time I felt truly seen and didn't look away. He hugged me too long, and I didn't stop him. And even now, I'm not sure I ever truly let go.